And I don't care what you guys say. Ice Spice is staying up. She's my Princess Diana, so I don't know what you want me to say. But you guys loved my love letter to Godzilla. And so I'm going to go ahead and make a follow-up to that because one of the comments has requested that I talk about the 1954 Gojira, which is one of my favorite things for people to ask me to talk about because I get to mansplain. I'm a little bit of a Godzilla head. You know, I've done my fair research of Godzilla through the catalog, you know. I've gotten a lot of... This is a good one. If you want to learn a little bit about the history of Godzilla, get this Life magazine edition of Godzilla. I'm going to be breaking this into 4 topics. Versions, suits, the pool, and the models. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the versions of Gojira. As you will see on my screens, here we have one playing with a white guy, and then we have one that's completely Japanese produced. One of these is not like the other. The original Godzilla was released in 1954, and the American version of Godzilla, Godzilla King of the Monsters, did not come out until about 3 years after that. And when they did, the American studio that got the distribution rights for it did not think that America was ready for the anti-nuclear message within Godzilla, or Gojira, I should say. And so they added B-list actor at the time, Raymond Burr, and they filmed over about 40 minutes of the original version. There's not necessarily anything wrong with Raymond Burr, but just the original is so much better. And you know, with the message that Ishiro Honda had, you really don't want to tamper with it. Because the thing about Ishiro Honda as a director is he took on Godzilla because it was a very personable story to him. There was an incident called the Lucky Dragon incident where a group of fishermen actually were exposed to radiation through radiation that was polluted into fish. And then they ended up selling fish to the market. And so the story of Godzilla touched Ishiro Honda very, very dearly. There was actually 2 other directors in Toho that got offered the Tanaka script that was labeled as Project G, and they both turned it down because everybody viewed a monster movie that would have been at this high budget as a risk. And if something goes wrong, it's a knock on your credibility. And Ishiro Honda took it on with special effects coordinator Tsuburaya, and they basically made a passion project out of it. And that's why the original came out so good. And so to film over about 40 minutes of that movie, you lose that passion. You know what I mean? And instead, it's genuinely an American studio trying to make a buck off the movie. Like, you can see from the tone, it's very serious, and Tsuburaya and Ishiro Honda wanted it to be that way. And now that we're talking about Tsuburaya, I'm going to go ahead and go into the suit. In the Criterion Collection, if you have, or even if you have the, not the Criterion Collection like the big book that we were looking at last time, if you just have the Gojira 54 cut of Godzilla, there is a featurette in there that features, let me check my notes because I don't want to say their name wrong, Mr. Izo and Mr. Iri. So Mr. Izo specifically works directly under Tsuburaya and worked in the creation and effects regarding to the Godzilla suits. And there already is a misconception with the Godzilla team. There's a conception that they had Tsuburaya himself had a whole special effects team. Toho did not have a special effects department until after the second Godzilla movie because of Tsuburaya. Tsuburaya is the reason that special effects at Toho became a thing. At the time, it was just Mr. Izo and Tsuburaya working together. So Mr. Izo, in conjunction with Tsuburaya and the orders from the studios, put together the first suit. And it was a prototype suit, and it was actually too scary originally. So the studio wanted them to make some minute changes, and they ended up making a whole new suit. And you gotta remember, this is post-war Japan. So like materials aren't everywhere, and the materials that are around are super expensive. And a big deal with this particular production was arguing back and forth with the studio to get materials to build a suit. And they ended up having to build the original Godzilla suit out of wire mesh, bamboo, liquid latex, a very cheap liquid latex, and I'll circle back to that, and quick setting ready cement. And So the suit was very heavy. The way that they did it was they would build a frame out of bamboo and the wire mesh, and then layers of paper, the quick mix cement, and liquid latex over that. And the liquid latex is something in particular that you have to go over because it explains a little bit about how Godzilla looks in the movie. The liquid latex was a very cheap liquid latex because it was all that Toho could afford at the time, because the Godzilla production ended up being one of the most expensive productions of any Japanese film to that date. And so they already had gone way over budget. And when they were starting to put the Godzilla suit together, they ended up just buying the cheapest liquid latex that they could. And this resulted in the liquid latex constantly breaking down in the sunlight and under the hot lights of the studio and just like basically melting. And they would constantly have to get the suit out of the light and reapply liquid latex. And you can see that in the fact that no wide shot of the Godzilla suit looks exactly the same, because they were having to constantly repatch and keep it going. And the original suit, the prototype that they had made, was actually cut in half. And the top half got some patches to make it look more like the suit that they ended up using. And the bottom half is actually what they used for the close-ups of Godzilla's feet, so that the actor didn't have to wear the suit the entire time. There's a bunch of misconceptions that there was multiple suits on set. There was only one whole Godzilla suit on set. And on the other side, they had puppets for all the close-ups of like Godzilla biting and the stuff. They had 2 puppets that were made, but the puppets were interesting because they look nothing like the suit. The puppets look terrible. Like, I love this movie, but like the puppets, they look terrible. They should have started from scratch on those, but they probably didn't have time or the money. I have limited time, so I'm going to move on to the next topic, which was the pool. Ishiro Honda, with the story of the Lucky Dragon incident, knew that he wanted a boat scene in Godzilla so that he could show like Godzilla compared to the size of a boat. And what they ended up doing was they figured out a way to mix gelatin into the water with veterinary supplies to be able to make the water seem more flowy, and as if like the scale to the waves of the water were bigger, and so like the waves made more bigger and made more white. And they basically perfected this, and what they did was they filled they made a frame around a 10,000 square foot sound stage at Toho Studios, and they filled it with this water and gelatin mixture. And so what ended up happening was you had this giant studio pool in the middle of Toho Studios. And this would go on to be like a big mark for Toho Studios. And it was kind of this innovative thing because this would go on to get used in other Toho production movies. One that bounces off my head immediately is Kagemusha. There's a whole dream sequence that happens in Kagemusha. And that takes place around the same pool, I believe. And it's a basic pool. It's a 10,000 square foot pool with a backdrop that can be painted to whatever the director feels. And the reason I have to bring that up is because Haruo Nakajima, let me make sure I said his name right. Yeah, Haruo Nakajima, I really never forget because that guy's a hero. But Haruo Nakajima was the guy that wore the suit, and there's so many accounts of him like passing out from heat exhaustion from wearing the suit. But furthermore, there's a very scary story of him having to wear the suit in this gelatin mixture and almost drowning, and he had to get pulled out of the suit at the last second. And Haruo Nakajima is he's actually a cinematic hero. Tom Cruise takes notes from him. If you want to like admire him a little bit, this is gonna sound weird, but there's a really cool coffee commercial about him. Literally a hero. He could get his own video, as a matter of fact. The next thing I'm going to address is the model making. Circling back to the conversation about there being low fundage and low materials, when it came to model making, things got pretty bad. Izo, in the featurette that's in the Criterion Collection, he basically explains making the model kits for Tsuburaya, and he was just basically mashing things together that's Toho had in their warehouse and making constant runs to models and hobby shops to be able to build all these structures, really. And he was running around and building so many things, he started to have to improvise. And so there's this really cool story that he tells in the Criterion Collection about how at one point he had bought all of the plaster that this one particular model shop had available, So he went across the street to a grocery store and bought a big box of like cookie wafers. And he took the cookie wafers back to the studio, and he started making walls out of the model houses out of cookie wafers that he painted with like a primer, a really thick primer paint. And that's basically how like some of the models got finished, was with like this mixture of like actual model kits and wafers. He literally went down till they had nothing. He like worked and worked and worked until they had nothing. And then what he ended up started doing is he started reusing stuff that was broken. So him and Tsuburaya would talk to Nakajima inside the suit, and they would be like, okay, you're gonna walk this way, and you can only destroy the buildings from here to here. And the reason that they did that was because they had to reuse and move other buildings and put them to other places. And it was interesting, there's a bit that I found of Tsuburaya talking about the models, and they built them to 2 different scales. They did a scale of 1 to 15 and 1 to 30. And the reason they did that is the 1 to 30s you could put closer to the camera and incorporate more detail into them because they were bigger. In the 1 to 15s, you could put the 1 to 15 models closer to the subject, and it would also create that depth, like Godzilla's further away and the buildings are further away because, you know, things that are further away are smaller. And then Godzilla is still this dude in the suit, so he looks massive. And it's like little tricks like that. Little tricks like that make Godzilla so inspirational to people in production and people in film. I'm not trying to say the effects are special or anything, or like they're gonna fool you, but they made a good and convincing movie. It harkens back to the emotions from World War II, and that is by design. And it's a really a beautiful story. It inspires a lot of people some like it too, because it shows that no shot is really impossible. There's a way to get everything done. You just have to have the strength and the ingenuity. If you would like for me to review another Godzilla movie, please. My personal favorite is the Astro Monster. That's my favorite, where he goes to Planet X. If you guys are familiar with that one, I would love to talk about that one. If you guys want me to talk about a newer one, I'll talk about a newer one too. If there's anything else you want me or somebody else in Some Like It to talk about or rant about or mansplain about, just drop a comment. Please leave a like while you're at it, and subscribe if you haven't. Our subscribes are low. They're very low. We need help. But I'm Joey. It's been nice talking about Godzilla with you guys again. I'm glad you guys liked the first video, and I'll see you guys again.